Caitlyn Clark just made Team USA's roster for the upcoming World Cup qualifying tournament. But somehow that announcement created more questions than answers. Because the moment the roster dropped, fans didn't just celebrate. They started arguing. And the debate wasn't about whether Clark deserved a spot. That part was obvious. After all, we're talking about the player who shattered NCAA scoring records, packed arenas across the country, and completely transformed the attention around women's basketball. By almost every measurable standard, Caitlyn Clark isn't just one of the best young players in the world right now. She's the biggest name the sport has seen in years. So why are people already whispering that she might not even start? That's the part nobody expected. On paper, the roster looks loaded with talent. Veterans who have won championships. Rising stars who dominated college basketball. A mix of experience and youth that should make the United States the clear favorite once again. But behind the scenes, a quiet battle is already taking shape. Because when it comes to the most important position on the court, the one player who controls the entire offense, there's only room for one leader. And suddenly 3 different stars are competing for that role. Caitlyn Clark, Paige Bueckers, and Olympic gold medalist Chelsea Gray. Each of them brings something completely different to the table. Each of them has supporters inside the basketball world. And each of them believes they should be the one running Team USA's offense when the games begin. That alone would be enough to create tension. But the situation gets even more complicated when you look at who's actually making the decisions behind the curtain. Because this isn't just about basketball talent. It's about relationships, long-standing programs, old loyalties that go back decades. And when those forces collide with the arrival of a superstar like Caitlyn Clark, things can get messy fast. By the time this tournament tips off, the real drama might not even be happening on the court. It might already be happening inside Team USA itself. The moment USA Basketball released the roster for the World Cup qualifying tournament, the reaction was immediate. Within minutes, social media was flooded with screenshots, reactions, and debates. Fans refreshed their feeds over and over again, trying to make sure they read it correctly. And right there on the list was the name everyone was looking for. Caitlyn Clark. For many fans, that was the only confirmation they needed. The biggest star in women's basketball was officially wearing the red, white, and blue on the senior national team stage. It felt like the next natural step in a career that has moved at lightning speed ever since her college days at Iowa turned her into a national phenomenon. But the more people looked at the roster, the more interesting the situation became. Because this wasn't just any Team USA lineup. It was a roster filled with players who are all trying to prove something. You've got veterans who have already won Olympic gold medals and WNBA championships. Players like Kelsey Plum and Chelsea Gray have spent years performing under pressure. They know what international competition looks like. They've played in loud arenas overseas where every possession matters and every mistake gets punished. These are players who don't just expect minutes on the floor, they expect respect. Then there's the other side of the roster. The younger generation. Caitlyn Clark, Paige Bueckers, Angel Reese, Aaliyah Boston. Several players who dominated the college basketball world and now represent the next era of the sport. Each one arrives with their own spotlight, their own fan base, their own expectations. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because when a roster is packed with this much star power, something unavoidable happens. Not everyone can be the main character. Only 5 players can start a game. Only one player truly controls the offense. And when multiple superstars believe they deserve that role, the tension can build quickly, even before the team plays its first minute together. For fans watching from the outside, it might look like a dream lineup. A perfect mix of talent ready to dominate international competition. But inside the basketball world, people understand something else. When this many big personalities and elite players share the same locker room, decisions get harder. Coaches have to choose who runs the offense, who closes games, who sits on the bench when the game is on the line. And once those choices are made, someone always ends up unhappy. But the real surprise about this roster wasn't just who made it. It was who didn't. And once fans noticed those missing names, the conversation around Caitlyn Clark and the rest of the team suddenly changed completely. When fans first scanned the roster, they were excited about the names they saw. But it didn't take long before people noticed something even more surprising. Several of the biggest stars in women's basketball weren't there at all. No Aya Wilson. No Brianna Stewart. No Sabrina Ionescu. No Alyssa Thomas. Normally, those players are the foundation of Team USA. They're the ones who carry the experience, the leadership, and the championship pedigree that make the United States nearly impossible to beat in international tournaments. But this time, they were sitting out. And that decision completely changed the dynamics of the team. Without those established superstars dominating the lineup, something unusual happened. For the first time in years, the next generation suddenly had real opportunities. Minutes were available. Leadership roles were open. Starting positions were no longer guaranteed for anyone. Instead of being surrounded by legends who control the offense and dictate the pace, young stars like Caitlyn Clark, Paige Bueckers, and Angel Reese were walking into a situation where they could actually define the team's identity. For some players, that kind of opportunity is exciting. For others, it creates pressure. Because when the safety net of veteran leadership disappears, the spotlight gets much brighter. Now the world isn't just watching to see if these young players belong on Team USA. They're watching to see who becomes the face of the next era. And that's where Caitlyn Clark immediately stood out. She's already proven she can handle massive expectations. During her time at Iowa, every game she played felt like a national event. Arenas sold out weeks in advance. Television ratings skyrocketed whenever she stepped on the court. Even people who didn't normally watch women's basketball suddenly tuned in just to see what she would do next. Her impact followed her straight into the WNBA. Ticket sales jumped. Merchandise flew off the shelves. Broadcast numbers climbed higher than the league had seen in years. Whether people loved her or criticized her, everyone was paying attention. And when someone carries that level of influence into a national team environment, the pressure only grows. Because now the expectations aren't just about scoring points or making highlight plays. Now the question becomes much bigger. Can Caitlyn Clark lead the next generation of Team USA? Or will someone else take control of that role before she gets the chance? Because as soon as people started breaking down the roster more closely, one thing became very clear. There wasn't just competition for playing time. There was a full-blown battle brewing for the most important position on the team. Every basketball team revolves around one position. The point guard. That's the player who controls the tempo, decides who gets the ball, and ultimately becomes the extension of the coach on the floor. When things get chaotic late in a game, it's the point guard who has to settle everyone down and make the right decision. On this Team USA roster, that responsibility is still up for grabs. And 3 different players have legitimate claims to it. The first name everyone talks about is Caitlyn Clark. Her resume is almost impossible to ignore. She left college as the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history. Her shooting range stretches far beyond the three-point line. Defenders have to start guarding her the moment she crosses half-court, which opens the floor for everyone around her. But Clark's real superpower isn't just scoring. It's vision. She sees passing angles most players never even notice. 1 second she's pulling up from deep, the next she's firing a perfect pass through 3 defenders for an easy layup. That ability to stretch defenses and create opportunities for teammates is exactly what a modern offense needs. Then there's Paige Bueckers. If Clark plays with explosive energy, Bueckers plays with smooth precision. Her game is calm, controlled, and incredibly efficient. She doesn't force shots. She reads the floor patiently and makes smart decisions that keep the offense flowing. When Bueckers first arrived at UConn, she immediately looked like the next superstar in women's basketball. Injuries slowed that momentum for a while, but when she's healthy, her skill level is undeniable. Many analysts believe her style actually fits the traditional Team USA system perfectly. And then there's the veteran in the room. Chelsea Gray. Gray doesn't have the same social media buzz as Clark or the college spotlight that followed Bueckers. But when it comes to experience, very few players in the world can match her. She's won championships. She's earned Olympic gold. She's hit clutch shots in some of the biggest games imaginable. Teammates trust her because she rarely panics, even when everything around her gets intense. In other words, she's the kind of player coaches often rely on when the stakes are highest. So now the question becomes simple. Who runs the offense? Clark has the explosive playmaking ability. Bueckers has the smooth, system-friendly style. Gray brings the veteran leadership. All three make strong cases. But the deeper fans look into the situation, the more they start to realize something uncomfortable. This decision might not be based purely on basketball ability. Because inside USA basketball, relationships have always played a powerful role. And when those relationships stretch back decades, they can quietly shape the future of an entire roster. To understand why this situation is becoming so controversial, you have to look at one of the most powerful pipelines in women's basketball history. UConn. For decades, the University of Connecticut has been a factory for Team USA talent. Year after year, their players move from college dominance straight into international competition, continuing a legacy that stretches across multiple generations. And the list of names that came through that system is legendary. Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart. All of them played at UConn. All of them became superstars. And all of them spent years representing Team USA at the highest level. That tradition created something bigger than just a successful college program. It created relationships that have shaped USA basketball for years. Now here's where the current situation starts to get interesting. The person helping oversee these decisions today is none other than Sue Bird herself. Bird isn't just a former player. She's now serving as the managing director for the USA women's national team, which means she plays a major role in evaluating talent, selecting players, and helping shape the direction of the roster. And once fans noticed that connection, the conversation changed almost instantly. Because Paige Bueckers also comes from that same UConn program. She's one of the biggest stars in the school's recent history and was once considered the future face of the sport before injuries temporarily slowed her rise. Even now, many analysts believe her skill set fits perfectly within the structured system that Team USA traditionally runs. So when people look at the roster and see Bueckers competing for the same leadership role as Caitlyn Clark, a few eyebrows naturally go up. Not because Bueckers isn't talented, but because the UConn pipeline has historically been incredibly influential when it comes to national team decisions. For years, critics have quietly wondered if that connection gives certain players an advantage when it comes to opportunities and playing time. And suddenly, Caitlyn Clark finds herself stepping directly into that environment. Unlike Bueckers, Clark didn't come from UConn. She didn't spend years inside that system building relationships with the same coaches and decision-makers who have guided Team USA for decades. She built her reputation somewhere else. At Iowa. And while her talent is undeniable, entering a system that has long been dominated by another program can create challenges that go far beyond what happens on the court. Because when traditions, loyalties, and long-standing relationships come into play, even the biggest stars sometimes have to fight a little harder to prove they belong. Caitlyn Clark's path to superstardom didn't follow the traditional blueprint. She didn't come from the powerhouse pipeline that had been feeding Team USA for decades. She didn't build her reputation inside a dynasty program surrounded by future national team stars. Instead, she built it at Iowa. And somehow, that made her rise even more dramatic. From the moment she stepped onto the college stage, Clark played with a style that felt completely different. She wasn't just scoring points. She was launching shots from distances that made defenders panic. One possession she'd pull up from the logo, the next she'd whip a pass across the court that nobody saw coming. Every game felt unpredictable. And that unpredictability turned her into something the sport hadn't seen in a long time. A phenomenon. Crowds started showing up hours early just to watch warm-ups. Ticket prices climbed whenever Iowa came to town. Television networks that normally ignored women's college basketball suddenly built entire broadcasts around her games. Even casual sports fans who had never followed the women's game started paying attention. Then something even bigger happened when she entered the professional league. Her arrival in the WNBA created an explosion of attention almost overnight. Arenas that used to struggle to fill seats suddenly sold out when her team came to play. Jersey sales skyrocketed. Television ratings surged. Executives across the league started realizing something important. Caitlyn Clark wasn't just another talented rookie. She was changing the entire business side of the sport. And when someone has that kind of impact, expectations become massive. Fans don't just want to see them play. They expect them to lead. Which is exactly why so many people assumed Clark would naturally become the centerpiece of this Team USA roster. But stepping into the national team environment is different from dominating college or even thriving in the WNBA. Because inside Team USA, hierarchy matters. Veterans expect respect for what they've accomplished. Younger stars are expected to prove themselves first. Coaches carefully manage egos, roles, and playing time to keep the locker room balanced. So when Clark arrived carrying the weight of enormous public attention, it created a fascinating situation. On one hand, she might be the most electrifying player on the roster. On the other hand, she's still the newcomer. And inside a system that has operated the same way for years, newcomers sometimes have to wait their turn. But there's another factor quietly shaping this situation. One that could influence how everything unfolds once the team finally steps on the court. The coaching staff. While fans focus on the players, the real power often sits on the sidelines. Because when a roster is packed with stars, it's the coaching staff that decides how everything fits together. And in this case, the group of coaches surrounding Team USA adds another fascinating layer to the story. Several experienced basketball minds are involved, each bringing their own philosophy about how the game should be played. Some prefer a fast, aggressive offense built around dynamic scoring. Others believe the national team works best when the ball moves constantly and no single player dominates possession. Those differences might sound small, but they can completely change how certain players are used. For someone like Caitlyn Clark, that distinction matters a lot. Clark thrives when she has the ball in her hands, reading defenses and creating opportunities. Her ability to stretch the floor forces defenders to react the moment she crosses half court, opening up passing lanes that most players never even notice. But the traditional Team USA system has often relied on something slightly different. Instead of one primary playmaker, the offense typically spreads responsibility across multiple players. Everyone handles the ball. Everyone contributes to the passing flow. The goal is to overwhelm opponents with constant movement rather than relying on one star to control everything. For some analysts, that raises an interesting question. Can Clark adapt her game to fit that system? Most people who've watched her closely believe the answer is yes. Despite the highlight reel shots that dominate social media, Clark has always been an incredibly intelligent passer and facilitator. She understands spacing, timing, and how to make teammates better. But whether the coaching staff fully trusts that adjustment is another matter entirely. And there's one coach in particular who might play an important role in that conversation. Stephanie White. White has worked closely with Clark during her professional career and understands exactly how her game operates. She's seen firsthand how Clark elevates the players around her when given the freedom to run the offense. Having someone like that inside the coaching room could be incredibly valuable. Because when discussions begin about starting lineups, rotations, and who should control the offense, voices that understand a player's strengths often carry weight. At the same time, the national team isn't built around one coach's opinion. Multiple perspectives collide in those meetings. Different strategies are debated. And sometimes the final decisions come down to compromises that leave everyone partially satisfied and partially frustrated. Which means by the time the tournament begins, the lineup choices might not simply reflect who played the best in training camp. They might reflect a delicate balance between talent, chemistry, and the complicated relationships that exist inside elite basketball circles. And just when things couldn't get any more interesting, another storyline enters the picture. One that fans have been talking about for years. Caitlyn Clark, Angel Reese, on the same team. Long before this Team USA roster was announced, Caitlyn Clark and Angel Reese were already tied together in one of the most talked-about rivalries in modern women's basketball. It started on the biggest stage possible. The national championship game between Iowa and LSU. That matchup instantly became more than just a basketball game. Every possession felt emotional. Every big play sent fans into a frenzy. Cameras caught every stare, every celebration, every moment of competitive fire between two players who refused to back down. Then came the moment that exploded across the internet. Angel Reese celebrating near Clark, pointing to her finger as LSU closed in on the championship. Within minutes, clips of that moment were everywhere. Some people loved the confidence. Others criticized the intensity. But one thing was undeniable. The rivalry had captured the attention of the entire sports world. Since then, every matchup between Clark and Reese has carried a little extra electricity. Fans debate who's better. Media outlets turn their meetings into headline stories. Even casual viewers know their names. So when the Team USA roster revealed that both of them would now be teammates, it immediately sparked a new wave of curiosity. Could two competitors who spent years battling each other actually thrive on the same side? Basketball history says it's possible. Some of the greatest teams ever assembled were built from former rivals who eventually learned to work together. Once the jersey changes and the goal becomes shared, competitive tension often transforms into mutual respect. In fact, there have already been glimpses of that possibility. During past exhibition games and all-star events, Clark and Reese have shown flashes of chemistry. One highlight in particular made the rounds online when Clark delivered a perfectly timed pass that led to an easy basket for Reese. The two briefly smiled afterward, and fans immediately started imagining what they could look like as full-time teammates. But a single highlight is very different from a full tournament. Because once real games begin, new challenges appear. Playing time becomes an issue. Roles become important. Everyone wants to contribute, but not everyone can be the focal point of the offense. If Clark ends up running the team's offense, Reese will likely rely on her to create opportunities inside. If someone else controls the ball, the entire dynamic could shift. That's why their partnership might become one of the most fascinating storylines of the entire tournament. Two of the most recognizable players in the sport. Two personalities that helped fuel one of basketball's most memorable rivalries. Now sharing the same locker room, and chasing the same goal. And while fans are eager to see how that chemistry develops, the truth is the stakes surrounding this tournament are even bigger than most people realize. Because for several players on this roster, these games aren't just about winning. They're about the future. At first glance, this tournament might look like just another international competition. Team USA shows up. They win most of their games. They qualify for the next stage. And the basketball world moves on. But this particular tournament carries a lot more weight than people realize. Because what happens here could quietly shape the future of the national team. These games are essentially auditions. Every minute on the court becomes evidence for the decision-makers watching closely. Who handles pressure the best? Who fits the system? Who elevates their teammates when the game gets tight? Those answers will matter when the final roster for the World Cup is eventually selected. And that's where the pressure around Caitlyn Clark becomes even more intense. She's not just playing to win games. She's playing to prove she belongs at the center of this team moving forward. If she dominates the way many fans expect, it becomes almost impossible to deny her a major leadership role. But if the coaching staff decides to limit her minutes or place her in a secondary role, the conversation around her future with Team USA could look very different. That's why every lineup decision during this tournament will be analyzed. Every substitution. Every moment when a player stays on the bench while the offense struggles. Fans will notice all of it. And to be honest, the attention surrounding this team is already far bigger than most international qualifying events. Part of that is because women's basketball is experiencing a surge in popularity right now. More people are watching. More networks are broadcasting games. The sport is growing faster than it has in years. But a huge part of that attention circles back to one player. Caitlyn Clark. Wherever she plays, viewership tends to follow. Ticket demand rises. Social media conversations explode. Even people who normally don't follow basketball start paying attention just to see what she might do next. That kind of spotlight changes everything. It means these games won't just be watched by die-hard fans. They'll be watched by millions of curious viewers who want to see if the hype surrounding Clark translates to the international stage. And if you've been enjoying breakdowns like this one, this is usually the point where people decide whether they want to keep following stories like this as they unfold. So if you like staying ahead of the biggest basketball storylines, this is a good moment to make sure you're subscribed. because the next few months around Team USA could get really interesting. Especially when the biggest decision of all finally arrives. Who actually starts when the tournament begins? At some point before the first game begins, the coaching staff will gather in a quiet room and make the decision everyone has been waiting for. The starting lineup. 5 names. That's it. And one of those names will control the offense from the moment the ball is tipped. For weeks, fans, analysts, and insiders have been debating who that player should be. Some believe experience should matter most, which makes Chelsea Gray the safest choice. She's already proven she can handle the biggest moments in basketball. Others believe Paige Bueckers fits the traditional system perfectly. Her calm decision-making and team-first style match the way Team USA has operated for years. But then there's Caitlyn Clark. The player who stretched the limits of what women's basketball could look like. The player who brought millions of new eyes to the sport. The player who can turn a quiet arena into a sold-out spectacle simply by stepping onto the court. For many fans, the answer seems obvious. Put the ball in Clark's hands and let her lead. But inside elite sports organizations, decisions aren't always that simple. Coaches think about chemistry, experience, and long-term development. They worry about balancing personalities and making sure every player understands their role. Sometimes the obvious choice becomes the hardest one to make. Because no matter what decision the staff makes, a reaction is coming. If Clark starts and dominates, the next era of Team USA may officially begin. If she comes off the bench while someone else runs the offense, the debate will explode across sports media within minutes. Fans will question the reasoning. Commentators will break down every possession looking for proof that the wrong choice was made. That's the reality when a player with Clark's level of influence enters the national team environment. Every decision becomes bigger. Every minute on the court becomes a statement. And the truth is, this situation might be about more than just one tournament. It might represent a turning point for women's basketball itself. For decades, the sport has been guided by established systems and long-standing traditions. But now a new generation of stars is arriving with massive audiences behind them, changing the way people watch, talk about, and invest in the game. Caitlyn Clark sits right at the center of that shift. Which means the decisions made around this roster could quietly signal what the future of the sport looks like. Will the established structure stay in control? Or will the rise of new superstars reshape how the game moves forward? That answer will start revealing itself the moment Team USA steps onto the floor. And honestly, the world will be watching. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Caitlyn Clark should start at point guard for Team USA? Or should the team rely on experience and system fit instead? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. These debates are what make sports so fun to follow. And if you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into the biggest basketball stories, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because if this situation is already this intense before the tournament even begins, just imagine what could happen once the games actually start.